Hello everyone, welcome back. Tonight I figured I would go and hack on my XAML test library, just for a little change of pace. It's something I've been poking at for a while. I know I've mentioned in the past I've been working on potentially doing a WinUI port. And just for anybody who cares, when I say WinUI tonight, this means WinUI3. Heyo. So just as a heads up, for anybody who is interested, the repository is here. Let me flip over. Boom. So this is the repository. There's a bunch of branches kind of hanging out here. The one that's important is the merge WinUI one. I've got like multiple WinUI attempts and experiments, and merge WinUI is the latest and greatest one. So real quick, let me just kind of review what XAML Test is. So for people who have done anything with the material design library, you've probably taken a look and seen that there are UI tests that are floating around. And the UI test is actually being powered by XAML Test. That's what's actually driving this. So in a nutshell, what it does is it allows you to write, and I'll just pick one of the tests here. It allows you to write a quote-unquote unit test in this manner here. This is one possible option where you can just drop in a chunk of XAML as a string, load it up, and then write some tests against it. The big difference between this and doing like UI testing of components that a lot of people will do with like STA fact with XUnit is XAML test actually spins up a full WPF application. So it starts up a brand new app, empty window, and just drops this chunk of XAML inside of it. Now, in this case, inside of the material design library, this test-based class actually has some helpers that do things like init the library with the material design styling already applied, so that I don't have to do that for every single test, because yuck. So when you see things like load XAML, just know that under the hood, it's doing things like initializing the app with the material design library. So the idea where normally in your app.xaml, you'd have to spin a new one, add in the appropriate merge dictionaries, set the theme color, all that jazz. Yeah, it just does all that for you. That way there's no thinking involved. Hey, just a Biba. So at least in terms of the way it goes, I personally like this way of UI testing a little bit better. I built this library to be able to test chunks of XAML because there wasn't really anything else out there that did that. Most UI testing libraries go through the accessibility API, which is fine if what you're trying to do is simulate a user. Where they fall short is when you say, give me the background color of my button. The API just doesn't expose that level of detail because it's supposed to simulate kind of coming in from the outside black box style testing in a lot of cases. So I wrote this effectively because I wanted unit test like stuff, but I also wanted it to stand up the entire WPF rendering pipeline. Otherwise, you have to simulate in your unit test all of the rendering pipeline that WPF does for you. I was like, yuck. So yes, these are UI tests. They're slower than unit tests, but they actually test all of it. And that is what we are trying to do. And if the string of my commit history is any proof, it is not trivial. So I'm gonna walk through just a couple decision points that I did on this library. So going into this, I did not know a ton about WinUI3. I've done a little UWP work. I've played around with WinUI and WinUI3 enough to be competent enough to spin up an app and do some stuff in it. That's fine. Building a testing library like this, it quickly makes you learn all of the dark corners very, very quickly. Like you run into some of the corners in it, and one library that is worth calling out because it has been WinUI EX. Morton has this wonderful, wonderful library. So shout out to Morton. This like if you're doing anything with WinUI, this library is very much worth taking a look at because there are some rough corners in WinUI, a lot of them. And this starts to smooth over a lot of it. Now with WinUI, as I've started to figure out, you can still get down to the lower level APIs. There's just not necessarily a pretty face on top of all of the APIs that you want. For example, the windowing API in WPF is very rich. You can do a ton of stuff, like set the left and top position of your window. That's not something you get easily out of the box. Like if you look at the list of extension methods that this library starts providing, things like always on top, center on screen, create a message dialog. Let's see, determine if you're minimized or maximized, determine if you're resizable. Do those things, right? All of that stuff you don't get out of the box. Now, you can clearly get down to the APIs to do that, but it requires a little bit of work. And so what this library does from Morton is it puts that friendlier face that a lot of people expect, right? The little things like you can't set the title of your window in your XAML in WinUI. You have to do that in code behind because it's not a dependency property. Little things like that. And it just makes me go, yuck. So, So if you're doing any WinUI3 work, I still think WinUI3 has the potential of being great. I think everything is there, or let me rephrase, I think a foundation is there. We will see. Everybody claims that it's going to be the next thing that kills off WPF. I'm not holding my breath. I've heard that line at least 2 times before, and so far both of those have been wrong. So we're gonna wait. But WinUI3 is one that I see some potential there, and I'd like to get around to taking the material design library and starting to do a little WinUI porting to it, just to play with it, because it has the potential of having some really cool stuff added to it that's just not possible in WPF. So it would be slick to do, and I would love to try it. But I am aware of how much work it is, and kind of in my mind, the first step is getting the tests being able to be written. That way, as a theming library is built out, tests can go along with it. That way, you got some stuff. Snoop doesn't work on WinUI3. Is there a replacement? Not directly. What you can do, let's see. I think this one works. I believe you can get away with the Visual Studio stuff. That's probably the closest replacement you're going to find. Oh, I got to kill this. Sorry, hang on 1 second. 1 second. This is where we're about to go. We'll get back to this little bit of WAT in a minute. This little bit of WAT. So M window gets new main window, blah blah blah. I believe you can get away with the WPF tooling. I still like Snoop over the Visual Studio. And I said WPF tooling. The Visual Studio tooling. I like Snoop better than it. Snoop just does a lot more. But let me... Does it not show here? Oh, does it not even give it there either? Oh, that's disappointing. That would be very disappointing. There may legitimately not be a straight up replacement. See, and this is, again, one of those areas where I don't even know what I would search for in here. I don't even know what to search for here. Visual tree. Debugging general. So you do get the hot reload, which is cool. And be aware, so you get the hot reload stuff, but it doesn't. That's XAML styler. Let me just try popping real quick the are not supported in the current application, or the execution is paused. Oh, so in theory it would work. Huh. I'm a little confused as to, so there is a reasonable possibility that I have done something to break it in my WinUI app here. We'll get to that in a minute. I've done some bad stuff. But I think that's probably the only likely replacement that you're going to see right now. And I think this is one of those areas where WinUI3 kind of starts to show its age or lack of age. That's the beauty of WPF. It's been around for so long. There's a rich tool set, lots of options, lots of stuff to play with. If you don't like the material design theming library, don't have to use it. There's plenty of other choices out there available to you. Right? WinUI3, not a lot of choices. Few and far between, in fact. So I think that's one of the big thing. And it's the chicken and the egg problem. Is everybody wants to see adoption before they port their stuff to it, but nobody wants to port their stuff to it because or nobody wants to bring their apps to it because there's not a lot of the libraries there. It's like so somebody has to kind of take that first step and nudge it along. So consider this my contribution to it. Okay, so in terms of the XAMLTest library, so if I look back at what it is on master here, right? It's a very simple thing. So there is a generator in there that does a bunch of stuff. We'll get to it, but the heart of it is really just very simplistic tests. And where is am I not in the... Oh, I'm in XAMLTest. I learned something. When you use test as part of your library name, you then end up with XAMLTest tests. And that just looks funny. In retrospect, I shouldn't have done that, but you know what? I committed to the name. I'm going with it. So, simple things like this. I want to start a remote app. This just happens to be another project in there. I want to get the main window. I want to check the title. Little simplistic things like this. You can see this is actually leveraging color zone from material design. I've actually disabled this test for WinUI because I can't write this test for WinUI because there isn't a material design port for WinUI yet. So test got disabled for that one. But very basic stuff like this. And in terms of project structure, it was fairly simple and straightforward. I had the main core library here, right? I had the unit tests. I had a source generator, which does get packaged with the NuGet package as well, because you can use the source generator in your apps as well. And then I wrote some in order to test the output from this generator, I wrote another generator to generate tests to test the output of the generator. So if you look at the number of tests in XAMLTest, it's huge. It's like 800 or 900, which is a ton, but for how little code there is. But a lot of those are auto-generated. So I literally wrote a generator to test the output of my other generator. And this is a fairly simple, straightforward thing. And when I looked at WinUI, what I wanted was, I was like, it'd be really nice if I could just like pound if some stuff and do some conditional compilation and keep everything kind of connected here. And that's ultimately where this WinUI experiment here started. And if we look at view all files, and get this, make you bigger, and then make you not on that, so my big head isn't in the way. And if we look at this, there's not a lot of changes. Right? I spun a WinUI3 version of the test app because I didn't want to pound if the world. But other than that, there's just a bunch of stuff in here that got pound ifed, and I royally abused things like directory build targets. Maybe I didn't do it here. But I built my own props file to be able to go through and do a bunch of conditions on it, and then a bunch of global usings, and then I'm going to alias a bunch of the usings so that rather than typing window, because window means something different in each of the frameworks and has a different namespace, I'll just type native window and I'll alias that on both sides, and it'll work great. And that's where I started. And whoo boy, if I had realized what a time sink that was going to be, I would not have started down that path. There is a lot of overlap in names between WPF and WinUI3, which is why I went down it as far as I did, because I was convinced I was this close. this close. Yeah, not as close as I thought it was. But this got me a good portion of the way there and actually helped me think through some of the problems. The next pass that I did, I was like, okay, that didn't work. WinUI take 2. And this is where I was like, okay, we're going to split this up. We are not going to just put everything in one place. And I guess this is a bad example. We'll just jump to the end. I was like, trying to pound if all of the projects and change the code back and forth between the frameworks, that isn't working. There's just too many differences. It's making the CS proj really painful to work with. The tooling is getting really confused. Like Visual Studio was having a fit with me because you get one property wrong, but because you've got all these conditions and circular references, it got ugly fast. And I was like, okay, back up. Let's think this through. What do we actually need at the end of the day? And at the end of the day, what I decided I needed is, I was like, well, I need a XAMLTest WPF output. Okay, great. We'll get a XAMLTest WPF. I kept the root namespace the same, but I'm like, you know what? I need a WPF output. I was like, well, but I also need a WinUI output. And these are close, but there's enough differences in here that it's a little bit painful. I was like, okay. But there's also some amount of code that I could share between them, this core library. I'm like, I can probably make this work, right? I can push some of the code down, but there was also issues with the tooling around protocol buffers, proto.net, that didn't play nice if you put your protocol stuff up in the WPF app project or the WinUI project itself. There was issues there. It fought with the XAML compilation. And so one of the solutions that I noticed on their repo that people commented, like, just put your protocol thing in a class library and reference that, problem solved. I'm like, yeah, but I was like, that only kind of works for me. And then it was like, well, because part of my issue is these XAML test projects are expected to be both an executable app and a library that gets referenced. It's double duty, which technically works just fine, right? You can get away with this. But some of the tooling and assumptions that are made is, oh, you're building an app, we don't need to worry about somebody referencing you as a library. It's like, well, I'm kind of abusing the fact that you can, so let's not break that. So I push some of the stuff into core, but then I have this shared project here. And you'll note this shared project has things like this app CS. And I think we probably don't have to look too far. Yeah. And there's little bits in here. And actually, I guess I can show it to you here. So this left drop down that most people don't ever look at, this is really nice. Because you'll note in here, I've got this shared project, but it also shows a couple things. So you'll note, even though I opened up app CS from inside of XAMLTest shared, you will note that this dropdown shows WinUI3 and then both of my WPF targets, which is, just gonna bounce over here real quick. I think I can boom. There we go. Sorry about that. Train of thought, circle back. So it shows all of my targets. And what I have done here is this library, even though it's technically has a target framework because it wouldn't let me go without it, I'm actually using a very unusual SDK. I'm using this Microsoft build no targets. So there is, and I think I mentioned this, side channel. Let's see, YouTube, Teletech. There is a user group talk I did a couple months ago, and I think I've brought this up before. So shameless self-promotion here, if anybody's interested. Let's not include the starting timestamp, please. Boom. There's the link. So that is a discussion on MS Build where I talk about MS Build SDKs, where you can get this kind of thing. This is just a NuGet package. It's no fancier than that. But unfortunately, I ran into issues dropping the target framework, but the target framework here is meaningless because, as the name implies, it doesn't actually build. This project here, just here to hang out. It's just a holding zone. In fact, I could eliminate the project completely if I wanted, because what ends up happening is this guy here gets file linked in. So if we look at the WinUI one and I do double arrows, you'll note I jump into the WinUI project and you'll see all this little icon here. Zoom it. Also, new version of Zoom It Out that includes screen recording. Go get your latest Zoom It. This guy here has, this is the symbol for a file link. So what that means is inside of WinUI, if we look, you'll note that I've added these little item groups that just look back into that shared project and say, grab all the CS files. And then, oh, by the way, ignore everything that's underneath the OBJ and bin directories. And you might be questioning yourself, why are there CS files in those directories? Because during the compilation process, things like assembly version attributes and all that jazz get written, yada, yada, yada. This was the path of least resistance to say, yeah, bring these ones in, but dump these ones out. Sorry, am I getting heckled from a side chat again? Oh, no. One of my colleagues is having all kinds of fun with native code and C#, and his current fun is execution engine exception. So if you want to run down a rabbit hole, that's a fun one. Anyway, so this is file linked in, and you can imagine in the WPF project, I've done something very similar. Same thing. This has also allowed me to go through and do some fun stuff in the test project, because you'll note that in the test project, I have some test controls. These are great. The problem is these don't exactly work in all cases in WinUI. So for example, this is a WPF window. But you'll recall at the beginning, I called out, you cannot set the title of a WinUI3 window in your XAML because it is not a dependency property, nor can you set height or width. This is WPF specific. So then what I ended up doing is I was like, okay, we can work around this. Just yes, I know I moved the file. Stop yelling at me and just navigate. Okay, we're gonna just jump back to the root, then change. There you go. Okay, so inside of my shared project, I created test controls, and I decided, I'm like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna add a suffix. So .wpf will be the WPF wins, and .winui3. That way I can keep all my stuff together. They're gonna be really similar. I'm gonna be copying between these things a lot. And so what that ends up doing is in the shared tests. So I did the same file linking stuff for the test project as I did in the other one. Surprise, surprise. You'll note this one shows them both. But then down in like the WinUI3 tests, what I end up doing is I say, okay, bring in everything, but rather than just star.xaml, star.winui3.xaml. And by the way, take out all of the WPF stuff. I don't want to include any of it because this star.cs is obviously going to pick up these CS files as well, and we don't want those included. So we just strip all that out and say, yeah, done. I don't know if the page one is explicitly needed. That may be a holdover from one of my other stuff, but regardless, ripped it all out. Next bit of pain and suffering that came into doing this is, as part of running this thing basically wants to do a process start on itself. So recall that I said that it's both a library and an exe that it's expected to execute against. In order to do that, WinUI3 apps can come in either packaged or unpackaged formats. And I ran into so many problems trying to get the unpackaged target to work. It is a pain in the neck. So let me explain what these things mean. If you follow the getting started guides on WinUI3, you will get yourself a nice Hello World app that works great and everything's happy. And by default, it's going to pick the packaged option for you. And what that does is it packages up the runtime. So in WPF, we sometimes take it for granted that the runtime needs to exist on the computers where we want our WPF app to go. We can't just copy and paste our WPF app onto random computers and expect it to work, right? If you target Net 6 and you run on a machine that doesn't have the Net 6 runtime, you don't work, you crash. Unpackaged is effectively giving you that same behavior. Is, okay, rather than packaging up the runtime with it, trust me, the runtime will be there. And if it's not there, rather than just straight up crashing, you still crash, but you crash with a variety of weird exceptions that don't make a lot of sense depending on the state of your system, which confuse the living daylights out of me. So if you're running down these problems and you're running into weird crashes with the unpackaged, my suggestions for debugging. Step 1, file new project with Hello World, because if that isn't working, start with basics, because if that doesn't work, you're in trouble. Step 2, validate that you downloaded all of the bits that you needed. So and this is the part, let me see if I can find the docs page. This page here. This is the error message that pops up will often say something like, couldn't find runtime, would you like to download it, yes or no? Something to that effect. And if you hit yes, it takes you to this page. And you'll note there's not a lot of direction here on what you should be downloading or installing. And there's a lot of very useful information here, but it's also kind of long. And you just kind of keep scrolling, right? And so, key things that you want to make sure that you're doing. If you are compiling and running everything, especially with C#, you're looking for both this guy here for the extension, as well as this 1.1 installer down here. The other option that you will note is when you get down here, don't stop where it says SDK downloads. What you are looking for, specifically if you're running into the unpackaged app case, is you're looking down these runtime download installers. The other thing that I ran into is there was because I've done development on various previews along the way, on one of my machines, I ran into a situation where the installer was failing, and because I was running it at the command line, it wasn't immediately apparent to me right away, because there was a bunch of output, that it failed, right? I expected big red squiggles, and I didn't see that, and so I carried on my merry way and didn't realize that the runtime hadn't installed, and then chased my tail for a while, because I'm like, I just installed the runtime. Why can't it find it? Why can't it find it? Oh, that's why. So that's the next step to chase, is make sure that you have actually installed it. And if there is a problem, you can run, I'd probably have to go and look up the command again. On one of my machines, I had to actually uninstall the old runtime to allow the new one to install. So if the runtime is not successfully installing, read all the output. It's important. You may end up, depending on if you've messed with some preview bits. Again, my machine, I'd messed with so many preview builds, installed, uninstalled, so many things. It was hard to say what exactly got me to that state. But uninstalling the old version of the runtime and reinstalling fixed it. So when in doubt, turn it off and back on again. Okay, that was a lot of talking. Pause for Mountain Dew. Oh, on the note of Mountain Dew, tonight's flavor is a new one that I found in the store recently called Frostbite. It is a lighter blue than the Voltage, and it is some sort of like, I don't know, it feels a little fruit punchy. It's very nice. I did also discover, and I would be drinking it now except for I had my last one earlier, Mango Mountain Dew. This one is potentially my new favorite. It is very good, and unfortunately it's so good that even my wife likes it, and we are currently out of it. So, disappointing. So, must fetch more. Okay. Mountain Dew goes in the special Mountain Dew holder, and away we go. Okay, so XAML test. What are we building? What are we porting? How's it going? Okay, so so I have a unit test passing. This is a big deal. It's my first passing unit test. I have one test passing of 1 down, 91 to go. This 91 does not include the generated tests. You can see the difference between generated and not generated. Not generated, 91. With generation, 650 something. Depending on your target, because some of them don't apply to multiple targets. But the important thing here to note is this thing is actually working. Right? I've got the debug output turned on so I can see it. I can see that it started itself up. It was able to query itself to get the version. Great, it outputted it. It was able to initialize, create a window. It was able to set the title property to the thing of test title window. It was able to retrieve that value. And then it cleaned up after itself. And when it waited for the process to exit, the process exited itself. One thing that tripped me up earlier this week, let's see, WinUI application.exit. I made the unfortunate assumption that this method would kill the process. You'll note it's documented as shuts down the app. That does not mean the process terminates. So for example, a lot of like Win 10, or I guess going all the way back, Metro apps, when you hit the X in the corner, the process may not terminate. It may just hide, and then Windows keeps, it's kind of sitting there frozen, going, well, if you ever click on it again, I got it ready. We're up. Everything's fast again, right? It's like, well, you didn't terminate. It's not a cold boot. The problem is for XAML test, I really want to kill the process. I don't want it reloading from a save state. I want it dead, all the way dead. Like, burn dead. And you'll note it does say, however, you should not provide this UI because the system automatically manages the app lifetime and terminates suspended apps as needed to free resources. And I went, darn it, I want to terminate. Because in my case, I really do want to force a clean start every bloody time. Like, I want to manage the life cycle out of my way. So this one tripped me up for a while I was very confused trying to figure out why the heck my app wasn't dying. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I decided to just do a process.kill myself and call it a day. I did realize there is an application restart event. It's under application lifetime. Let's see. One of these. I might have to hunt for it. There was an app restart method that I came across that would work. And it would work for one reason only, is in my main method, which that was something else I struggled with. In my main, so you'll note, get current process, kill. This is a very effective way to say die, self, die. Because I intentionally go looking for parse errors, if the appropriate arguments aren't passed on the command line, I can actually call restart, pass no arguments. The app will shut down, restart, hit my main method, and then terminate. And I was like, yeah, I could do that. Or I could just like I don't fully trust that API, so I just or I could just kill the process. So this was fun. So I went with the fun option. But this one is working. This one here is not. Okay, one other thing, and this is, again, one of those really obnoxious things about WinUI, but one of the things from Dot Morton's library that's worth calling out too is he does allow you to write your own unit tests. And there is a docs page from Microsoft somewhere. If you search for WinUI3 unit testing, you'll find it, where they walk you through the process of how to write a unit test project for WinUI. And effectively, This guy here, this WinUI test method, this is the equivalent of like the STA fact for WPF in XUnit. It's doing the same thing. It's getting you spun up with enough of the runtime to where you can then instantiate UI objects and make calls. But you'll note something. You have to do things like simulate the layout changes. I don't like this. I don't like to have to simulate what the pipeline, what I know the rendering pipeline is going to do for me, because I might get it wrong, darn it. The other thing that's very helpful to note, and this one surprised me until I tested and confirmed that it was correct, you can't actually launch your unit tests inside of a WinUI project with the debugger attached. It's just broken. Even if you follow the Microsoft tutorial that shows you how to spin a WinUI project, there's something about the WinUI project and the test adapter in Visual Studio, it will not auto attach. Just so weird to me. So if you want to debug your tests, you have to put in debugger.launch and manually attach to your own tests. This is dumb. This feels like something that is a glaring hole that will hopefully get fixed at some point. But something about the way the app starts and how the test runner attaches, it just falls over. Now, I may try to hack around it, because people who recall, I have a dirty little method in here. Yeah, I've got this Visual Studio attacher class that does some black magic that I found online. I found somebody who had called out the dirty little tricks that if you're running inside of Visual Studio, how to find your Visual Studio instance and manually attach your debugger to it. You'll note I've also commented out for WinUI because it appears to be breaking stuff. But I may, once I get the rest of the library working, I may take a pass at trying to auto attach the debugger, because if you can do debugger launch, theoretically, I should be able to do it programmatically. Theoretically. Because I've got more knowledge about the running tests than the test runner would. So theoretically, I can do some fun stuff. So yeah, so if you're interested in programmatically attaching the Visual Studio debugger to some code, potentially in another process, why, here you go. It is in there. So, okay, so here's where we're at. Is I got the first test working, which just creates a window. So this is just open an empty window shell. I want to validate that the title that got set. And so this is actually a helper method that it's validating here. So you'll note it takes in a title, applies that title to the window, and you'll note there is a pound if WPF here. So this looks kind of weird. It's building up a XAML string, but it's interpolated and it's kind of ugly. But Windows XAML starts here. It applies some XML namespaces because you can arbitrarily pass in extra if you want. And then these things, the startup location, the background, the title, the height, the width, these are all WPF specific, so those only get appended there. It then appends the closing bits of the window attributes and the content. And then for WinUI, let me flip this into WinUI mode. Inside of WinUI, I can call set title, because even though I can't set the title directly in the XAML, what you can do is there is still just a straight up title property on the main window. And so you can still do something like title gets, foop, or foop, depending on how you're implying. And because the set property in XAML test operates via reflection in a lot of cases, so it'll use dependency properties where it knows about them, but if there's just regular properties, these auto-generated methods such as set title will just operate via reflection to go at that property, which is great. I love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. So this is something that the generator builds out for me. At some point, I may get even more fancy with the generator and kill off all of the reflection, because in most cases, I might still have to leave the reflection as a fallback, but in most cases, I can probably just wire the assignment all the way through. But for now, the generators are just generating extension methods. And so you'll note that I called it set property because set property is the actual API. The set title, get title, these are just magical methods that the generator creates for us, which is cool, which is great. That's what we want. Okay, so the failure case though, so the basic Windows shim works. That test passes. Everyone's happy. Well, I'm happy. The one that's failing now is this one and this test window. And this is where I only know a little bit. So I'll share what I know and then we will debug it together. Huh? Well, that looks dumb. That's the WPF side. That looks like somebody had a merge conflict and resolved it incorrectly. That's not the right test window. Let's try that again. I just closed my test. Sure. Put me in WinUI3 mode, please. Okay. Here we are. So this test window, and I think I need to bring these over so I can see which one is which. I want this guy. So you know, one, I've got a debugger launch sitting here for the debugger attaching problem. But you'll note it also has a title here. And so this guy is currently failing, saying that exception has been thrown as part of the invocation, blah, blah, blah. XAML parsing failed. This is another flaw of WinUI3 that I've discovered. Sometimes the error messages are utter crap. So this message, as I have determined, can come up in a variety of ways. And in this case, it appears to be coming up because it was unable to find the needed XAML. So in WPF, your XAML gets compiled down into what is called BAML, B-A-M-L, and that gets put as an embedded resource inside of your assembly. WinUI3, that does not appear to be the case. So let me explain what I mean. So in order to test this, what I did is I wrote a little code. So I have this little WinUI3. This is just a test app. There's nothing fancy going on here. Doesn't have any special packages or frameworks or anything. It is basically the Hello World app. But when it launches, I told it, okay, load up this assembly. Hey, Jared, welcome. I told it to go through and do the assembly load from. And I just hard-coded the path because this is testing code. This is throwaway stuff. So I hard-coded it, told it to load it up. And then I said, okay, look inside that assembly that you just loaded, find the window type, and then call activate or create instance on that window type. Because under the hood, inside of XAML Test, if we go and take a look, app, not app, let's see, test service. This is where the meat and potatoes actually happens. If we look at create window, boom, you'll also note another debugger launch and a breakpoint because I was chasing this. What ends up happening is once we get into here, it's already done the assembly load from. So that much has already been done. It calls get type, get window type, and then activate or create instance. Okay, so this little test project, which this is also a good thing for anybody struggling with a problem. When in doubt, simplify your problem to the absolute teeniest bit of code you can. And if you can't reproduce with that teeny bit of code, keep adding on to it, making it look like the real thing until you find the trigger that breaks it, which is what I ended up doing. This took about 4 revs to get down to this before I figured out what were the key bits. Now, if I launch this guy, I am set on WinUI3. If we launch this guy, you'll note it's going to go through, and I'm going to put a breakpoint here. We have to recompile and think. Sorry, I was changing branches right before my stream, so it's probably a little bit confused. There's a decent number of compile steps now in this little solution that's growing. Okay, so key things here. Why do I have my containers open? I don't care about you. Go away. Go away. Locals looks more interesting. Okay. So locals, you'll note that it was able to find the assembly. This is not null. I realize it's tiny, so let me make it bigger. Whoop, there we are. So it was able to find the assembly. Great. It was able to find the window type. Great. So it's resolved the type. It knows where everything is. And when we call activate or create instance, it worked. And I saw this and I went, what? And so I was like, okay, let's look at what's actually going on. So if we go into bin debug, you know, this little guy exists here, this class library. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to do real quick clean. No, just to prove a point. Folder is now empty, right? We'll launch again. For those people wondering, you do have to go bin x64. That's just the way I have it configured at the moment. Okay, so once again, found the assembly, found the window type. Everyone's happy. We step and look at that. XAML parsing failure. And I went, oh? I was like, wait a minute. It worked just a second ago. Why did it start failing? And this confused me for a great period of, or a great deal of time. And you'll note there's something a little different here. You'll note there's this XBF thing here. And if we back all the way up and we go, hang on. So class library 1. This is legitimately class library 1, as the name implies, is literally a class library where that contains a blank window, which, no surprising, trust me on this one, it just contains a blank window. It's nothing fancy. But if we look at the output from this guy, you'll note in addition to the DLL, which this is the file that we loaded, there's this folder right here. And this folder contains a XAML file and an XBF file. And I went, well, that's interesting. I wonder why those are there. And so I copied this guy and I was like, you know, those are right along, that folder's right alongside the DLL. Huh. I wonder what happens if I go right next to my WinUI3 bin debug. Because something that I know about assembly resolution is that the default spot is, hey, look in the current folder. And I went, let's just put it in the current folder. Let's see what happens. And so we fired this guy up. Bear in mind, the guy that just failed, right? I've changed nothing. Step. And it works like a charm. And I went, okay. We did the failing test, the succeeding test. Now, if you want to make absolutely certain, you go back to the failing condition. So if we delete the XBF file and run this guy again, because we know that the presence of those two made it work. Boom. So this is where I've left myself in a conundrum. So clearly, I need the XBF files to go along with it. And I'm, at present, a little confused. I have no idea what goes looking for those XBF files, how it goes looking for them, or anything like that. And I'm kind of confused as to why they sit alongside the assembly and not in the assembly, and more importantly, if I can put them there. So that is where we start our adventure, because on one hand, I'd really like it if it would just work. On the other hand, I have to be conscious of the fact that there may be other consumers of this library that want it. However, given the use case of this library is very specific and targeted at testing just sections of code, not whole apps, I'm kind of thinking that I've got a little bit of grace in terms of leeway. So, step one, get yourself into the right directory, because cd dev XAML test, that one, please. Okay, cd class library, and then we're gonna go with .NET build BL. So BL, that YouTube video I linked before, I'll link it again if people are interested. That's the one that covers MS Build. This one, so the BL switch added to the .NET build command is what is called binary logger. So this will generate an MS build.bin log or similar. What is your problem? Windows App SDK, Microsoft Build System cannot be loaded from the assembly. Oh, is it because I compiled it at too low a level? Probably because I compiled it at too low a level. I think this thing, it's looking for one of my solution level items. Let's try this. Yada, yada, yada. Build. Dane Boy, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. We are attempting to learn something about how WinUI compiles XAML, or at least I'm attempting to learn it. And I've got a whole bunch of warnings and errors and all kinds of other stuff. Interesting that it still failed to compile. Oh, this is going to become real annoying real fast if I can't do my binary logger. Could not load file or assembly. AppX package. See, I've run into this before as well, where the build inside of Visual Studio is cheating and setting something up. MRT, oh boy. Okay, I have a global.json. Allow pre-release. Let's start with this. Let's turn that off. Okay. Because you'll note there was all of those errors at the beginning about the that I was using a preview build of the .NET SDK. For those who recall from last time, the 60302 fiasco of breaking source generators. Yeah, definitely broke this library too. For anybody who has run into that, I recommend a fix similar to this. So you can find the directory build.targets in the XAML test project. You can also find a similar one hanging out in actually, I'll probably just link the material design one real quick, because that's probably easier for people to find. So if you are in fact running into issues with a WPF app and a source generator that surprisingly started running twice, I recommend adding a file similar to this. You probably want to rename the thing at the beginning to make it be more meaningful to you. Doesn't really matter what you put here. The only reason for the prefix is to make it unique. So pick anything that makes it unique. I don't care. You can call it foo. All this does is limit the analyzers to a distinct set, which is the fix that was the PR that was being merged into the WPF SDK, which is great. But until it comes out, if you are on 6.0.302 and using source generators inside a WPF application, you will probably note that they are running twice, and that will typically cause failures because typically source generators generate source, and it's usually an error if you generate multiple copies of the same source. Not always, but generally that's bad. Okay. Still failing. Okay, so we are going to abandon the binary logger because this is apparently problematic. Which is really annoying me because it is not showing me the... Well, hang on. Let's look. So this MS build bin log. So that's what I want. So I have already preemptively installed the MS build structured log viewer. You can get this as well. I thought the latest version had a... Isn't there a dark mode option? Build open load. Maybe not. I thought there was a dark mode option. You can also get this as a web-based application. Do be aware that you want to be careful if you are working on a sensitive project, you may want to review the contents before uploading. So if you're at all concerned about sensitivity of potential data, please be careful about that. It is uploading everything from your build log. So if your build log contains sensitive data, you might not want to upload it to the web one. I mean, I trust Microsoft, but it's usually best not to upload sensitive data to an external server. Okay. But despite airing out, it has given me useful information. So what I am now interested in is hunting this log for, what was it, XBF, I think is what the output files were. That one's deleted. So let's go back and look at the other one. Class library 1, bin, debug. Yeah, XBF. So we can come in here and we can go XBF. Show me all the things. Well, look at that. There's a property called disable XBF generation, set to false. Disable embed XBF. Well. So I've got a theory. Let's set the disable embed XBF to false and see what happens. See, copy, name. So if you want to know how to set a property, it's very simple. You come into a property group and you go, whoop, and then you set it to a value. Okay, so I want to clean the output of this first before I get too carried away. Okay, so class library output debug empty. Okay, then we're going to build it, and I'm curious if that actually puts the XBF files as embedded resources inside the assembly, because that would make me a lot happier, because then I probably don't have to do weird stuff. Because XAML Test could even set that property if I wanted to. Because right now, working is the most important feature. Okay. So that didn't appear to do what I wanted. I do want to test real quick. Let me actually open up a second folder. I got too many folders open, so close. Okay, so let's go back here. The WinUI3 app, bin, x54, debug, det6. Okay, let's blow this away. Okay, so I'm curious because I did change that property. What happens if I launch? And we might go take a quick peek inside that assembly too, just to see if anything changed. Because I will note, we didn't look at how this property was used at all. I just saw the property and went, ooh, the name looks right. Okay, so create instance, fails. Okay, so clearly that didn't quite do what I wanted. So let's do one more build. So here's the nice part. The app itself loads in the build log, and I'm about to blow the bin log away, but because I have it loaded, I can just drag this thing over here, and it's going to hang out for a bit. And then here in a minute, we're going to have a new one, and we'll just look and see. And we should be able to confirm on the new one that the property is in fact set the way we expect it to be. Now, it's possible somebody else changes it later down the pipeline. That's a thing that can happen. But we will. Yep, do your thing. I kind of am interested in just disabling those tasks. So let's fire this guy up. Whoop. Yep, there's errors. I get it. Shut up. Okay. So let's find that's the WinUI3. I am interested in the class library 1. Okay. XBF. Go. Okay, disable embed is in fact set to false. That's nice. I am noticing there's a few other properties I probably should do. Apex exclude. See, I don't know how these relate to packaged and unpackaged either. Gen XBF path. Is this the tool that does it? But that certainly looks like a tool, given that it's underneath a tools directory. Override disable XBF. There's a property that okay. We're going to ignore all of these. Everything that's underneath that. Okay, so we will take a look. So here is XBF references in here. And this is the kind of the multi-compile pass that I've mentioned before. So let's see. In markup compile pass 1, which comes before target markup compile pass 2, who would have thunk? Let's see. This does... Well, that certainly looks... So this is going into the OBJ directory, but typically at the end the OBJ gets copied into bin. So it would not surprise me at all. Let's see. Clean, unfiltered. Find under path, blah, 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 blah. Remove dupes. Okay, so one of you... Hang on, disable generation is still set to false. Do you just not... where was the... Take me here. So you'll note the nice part. You click on the left pane, it opens up in the middle pane. Double click on the middle pane, it'll actually take you directly to the targets file itself. So we can actually look at what is going on. And quite often, you will find stuff that is related, all kind of bundled around it. So inside of markup compile pass 2 target, we can see like property groups and conditions and things like that. Why will you not let me resize the window? I can resize this one, but I can't resize this one. Oh, there you go. Okay. SDK. Because the unfortunate part is even after all of this, XAML pages, XAML applications. So this is what goes in. Disable generation. Hang on. Was that set to true or false? Disable generation. Oh, I want disable generation set to true. Did I just set it incorrectly? Oh, disable embedded. Oh, I wonder if we want to... We turned off the disabling of embedding. And I'm curious where this embedded one works. And it could be that this property just isn't consumed anywhere, which is why changing it didn't appear to do a darn thing. Because you can set whatever properties you want. Doesn't mean that they're accessed. And it doesn't look... So it does a bunch of stuff. Generated code files. Output name, file rights. Generated XBF files. Input serializer. XAML compiler, executable, blah, blah, blah. Output serializer. Oh, hang on. Do you do anything with this? Are there more references to this guy here? Output serializer. So I am noticing there is some output generated here. Managed assembly. Okay. Use XAML compiler executable. If that is true, so is that value true, I guess is the question. Yes, it is. Let's see. File XAML was evaluated to true, not equal to true. Great. It's interesting that it shows that output condition. What is managed assembly? Is that true? Let's see. This is for unmanaged. Okay, got it. Managed versus unmanaged bits. Okay. Makes sense. I don't actually see a way. Okay, we're going to ask the Googles next. Let's see. WinUI3 embed XBF files. These loose critical UI files, if users miss some of them or oh, look at that. I inspected a pre-gen targets file and the layouts file. Layout file item can be injected and my app works well without these loose. So what does this do? So this sits here. They're setting their before and after targets. I am noticing that that does look very similar to the one that ended up failing on me a little bit later. Oh, this one ended up actually succeeding. No, it didn't. It failed here. Okay. So if that is the case, I am also noticing this is VCX proj. Let's see here. What exactly is this doing? So my XAML embedded files. So it grabs a set of layout files under the condition that the extension is set to XBF or XAML. Okay. And then it reads lines from the file. And then it outputs those lines. So this reads the contents of the file, and this guy here has an output of lines called items from file, which gets referenced here. So the lines coming from that file get added to a set. My embedded file list gets added to that set. So this is a set of items. I'm trying to decide what this is. It's just file names, apparently. Write lines to a file. Interesting. Still deploys with the single project MSIX blank embeds the XBFs into resources.pri so they aren't loosely packaged, obviously visible. Well, that's disappointing. So when they do the MSIX packaging, they will package them up, but because I very intentionally do not want to use the MSIX packaging for this, no working. So part of me is trying to decide, because I could theoretically, in my code, when I load in, so one option here is when we initialize with an assembly, because the whole point of doing this initialize with defaults and giving it an assembly location is so that it can effectively do this assembly load from. Like that's all it's doing, is it's looking up the path to a DLL and saying, okay, load from that assembly. Because if you don't load the DLL, you then can't load the types out of it, which is what is needed to be able to do this create window. Because even though the unit test project has a reference to it, that doesn't necessarily mean that the other project does when it actually starts it up. Because these things are effectively kind of talking to each other back and forth. So, like I could certainly have it when you initialize, have it go looking for other files, but that's kind of yucky. It's kind of yucky. I'm wondering if there's any sort of like late binding resolution stuff that happens. So how does this end up working? And this is what is this initialized component actually doing? Okay. Load component, great. Oh boy. Oh boy. I have a strong suspicion this is where we're about to lose it into unmanaged land. Yeah. Yeah, and this is where we drop into unmanaged land. So it's not going to be trivial to know exactly what this is doing. So what's the easiest way to go about doing this? So we could load in, we could just blindly go hunting for those other files and copy them over. Like that's a thing we could do. Yuck. I am a little surprised too. I'm actually mildly surprised that when I compile the test project, these controls don't appear to be getting added. Why would that be? Why would that be? Because I'm somewhat shocked that back up, because WinUI3 tests, because the class itself is inside of here, right? This test window is inside of this project, so I would expect it here. There it is. So why is it unable to find this? Why is it unable to find it? It's not due to the name, is it? That wouldn't make sense. Because I would assume this initialized component is going to give it... Yeah, so it's going to be looking underneath test controls. Resource locator. Component resource location. Application. Oh, interesting. It's a nested resource of a component. Lookup treats the AppX package as the root. I don't know how to change that. This guy gets generated, the code behind gets generated by this. Interesting. So I don't know what would ever change it to nested. How do I get at this? I mean, we can take a crack at this real quick and see if this makes any difference for us. We'll kill this bin log again. We'll just slap this guy in here. And then let's clean. Heard a beep. What are you unhappy about? Oh, you're unhappy because I just deleted the directory you were in. Okay, that's good. Directory's gone. Okay, rebuild. Something tells me I'm still going to get those files. Something strongly hints to me. Because there they are. Added my embedded items. Yeah, because this isn't doing anything to actually, like, prevent the file creation at all. Because it would have to be something... Okay. Back to the Googles. CI, CD trigger, blah, 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 blah. We'll need this at some point. Blah, blah, blah. This just excites me that it's doing an MS build command. Great. Really looking forward to running MS build commands. Building from command line. Yeah. Apparently just not now. Let's see. Does anyone... How to embed another executable? This one's actually on there. WPF. Close, Robert. It is a library that has a WPF project in it. Does that count? MFC control window and existing MFC application. It's on their roadmap. But it's complicated. Oy vey. Yeah, this is just bootstrapping. So there may not be a clean way of grabbing this. Okay, so let's test a couple other things then. So when this happens, is there a callback that occurs? Is the first question. Let's start with that. So normally under assembly load, there is a callback that happens. And it is somewhere down here. Can we get your opinion on the new Mango Mountain Dew after a refreshing sip? I would love to. I would love to. The drawback being, it's empty. So, I will say this. Absolute ringing endorsement. Very possibly my favorite Mountain Dew of all the Mountain Dews I've tasted. It is excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So good that I am out of it and need to go acquire more. The unfortunate part is the person who got it for me got it at a Walmart that is not close to my home, and I figured, oh, I can go to any Walmart. No. The only two stores I'm aware of in the city that have it are on the other side of town, which is disappointing. What's the count of cans that you've drank today? I don't know. I think this is number 5. This might be number 5. But I will say, Thursdays I tend to drink a little bit more. I drink more Mountain Dew while streaming. Okay, so assembly resolved. This guy is the callback that occurs when we load an assembly. So this guy gets registered up when we do the... Oh, I just noticed there's a bug here. Oh, I guess it's not really possible. I was going to say we blindly always register without worrying about if we register multiple times, but we kind of have a guard against getting in here multiple times. But we're just going to... My paranoia is going to get in here. So the way to make sure that you're only registered for an event once in C# is you do a blind unregister, because this operation will no-op if you aren't already registered. Otherwise, it will unregister you. And then this way you can ensure that you only ever have one handler registered. Let's see. We do not see show comment message in the chat, only on the video stream. That's interesting. Robert, are you chatting in some other chat? Huh. You may want to refresh, Justin. It's... Yeah, as far as I can tell, it should be showing up for everybody. But I will not eliminate a Twitch issue. Okay. Okay, so I want to know, are we getting inside of this? Well, more importantly, if I create one of these things, does it trigger when it goes to load that file? I'm not even in mod view. That's because you're one of the special mods, Robert. Okay, so let's go here. So we're going to do this. We're going to register up a handler. And sudo make me generate method. Pretty please. That's not what I wanted. Autocode, do it for me. Why am I thinking? I can't be trusted to type. Okay, so this guy here, return null. So typically this callback gets invoked when it's looking for an assembly. And it's like, oh, is there one? So I'm curious if we hit one here or if we just blow up. Because if this callback gets invoked when it can't find the file, I'm just not sure it's going to. Like, would a resource locator trigger an assembly resolve? It does it for satellite assemblies. Huh. I don't know what's going to happen. We'll find out together. Come on. Compile. Go, go, go. Go. XAML parsing failed and we never hit... We never hit the callback. So, is there a resource locator hook somewhere? WinUI3 get up. Actually, I think I have this guy. And I kind of wonder what happens if I search for load. Show me. Hang on, go back. Uses this in load component. It must match the name of the directory. Yeah. Oh, hang on, hang on. Did we just stumble into this? Did I just stumble into it? Okay. Prepend initial path. XAML compiler uses this in the load component string. It must match the name of the directory and the Apex packaging system uses. In the Centennial case, which I think... So Project Centennial, I think, is the other one. because the unpackaged apps progress resources are placed in the root namespace. Prepend initial is set to false above if the unpackaged apps progress resources are to be placed in the root namespaces. So we decide based on that. So this guy here, for Centennial apps, we want the resources of the unpackaged apps to appear in the root namespace of the app. So we set it to false. Output type is WinExe for unpackaged app projects in C#. So this guy here, by controlling certain features, Apex generated PRI enabled. I wish I knew what this PRI stood for. App get package properties enabled. Project PRI index name is defined in the target not being run. Is not always defined as the target name. Blah blah blah. Oh, we're not bringing that in here. See, sometimes when you just search in the repository, finally to load the XAML with reflection. Oh, interesting. So the sample project. It loads assembly get manifest resource stream. It does not seem to work in the window. There's the problem. Change squid in project folder. This looks like somebody making it work. To remove designer generated. Okay. Builds. First we have problems with and when I start typing I don't have anything starting from D. Okay, so that's not overly helpful, but this immediately intrigues me. And initial path. So this is, if it's unset, I'm really curious now. Where's my MS build? Show me that guy. Interesting. So it's set to true in class library 1, set to false in my test app, set to false in my project. Oh, because the difference being if the target output is WinExe. Oh, interesting. So because my test project isn't an exe, it's getting set to true. And I think what I want to do is in my test project, set it to false. Man, this is going to be tricky. So let's see. For Centennial apps, that's the unpackaged Win32 ones, we want the resources of the unpackaged app to appear at the root namespace of the app. So set the value to false to make it appear at the root namespace. Now, the part that's confusing me is, what about if the component isn't in the exe project and it's in a class library? I kind of wanted to set it to false in the class library and see what happens. Because it was set to true in the class library. Yeah. Because it would have fallen into this else case. Because these are effectively if, else. Right? So the first one, because this property is likely not set anywhere else, it says, okay, if it's unset and the output type is WinExe, set it to false. Okay, if it's unset and output type is exe, set it to false. Okay, if it's still unset, set it to true. So this is just ensuring that if it's unset, it will then get the value of true. But that means in my class library, nothing is stopping me from doing... wait. I want it false. Okay. So now if we build this guy... Because effectively what I want to figure out is from inside of a WinUI3 app, how can I dynamically create an instance of a window in another project that I'm not directly referencing? And one thing that I did test is I did test just creating a hard project reference across. Oh, but I did that before looking at the XBF. I wonder if the XBF gets copied across in the case of a project reference. You might test that here in a moment. Okay, so this is... Okay, let's fire this up now and see what happens. What is inside of here? Oh, XAML parsing failed, so you failed. Okay, so I wonder what happens if we go back here all the way up. I wonder what happened, because right now in our output directory there is no class library 1. But I wonder what happens if I add a project reference and I reference class 1. Right? And then I rebuild. Does it just copy over the class 1 stuff too? Does it know? Is it like smart? Because I'm wondering if it'll just magically work because it'll find it. Come on, compile. Okay, while we're waiting for that thing to compile, I'll show this off real quick. So, for people who haven't noticed, I love Zoom It. So V6 came out. This button over here. So it lets you, it basically takes the Zoom It window and turns it into an auto recorder. So you do a recording, you just basically, it's a very simplistic. You toggle it on, you do your Zoom It recording the way you would use Zoom It normally, and then you toggle it off and it asks you where to save an MP4. And you're done. So not a lot of options, and I don't know what API is being used under the hood that has this limitation of 1903, but it's fairly good. Ah, interesting. I'm curious if this works now because it brought over blank window XBF alongside, not nested. Interesting. I wonder what that's going to do because this guy's initialized component. Oh, this guy has now moved him up to the root. Interesting. So changing that property did change something for what it's worth. So now I have a suspicion that this will work. That's my theory. This works now. Because so far, everything that I've tested, yeah, see, we got past create instance. Everything I've tested so far, so you'll note, I am blank. So having a hard reference and getting those things across works. So somehow it knows when it's referencing another project, it knows to copy those things over. Interesting. Interesting, interesting, interesting. So if there is a hard reference, it will find it. Now, hang on, though. Why can the test not find it, though? Why can the test not find it? Because the only thing that's different about the test... So, okay, so now that we know how that one worked, let's go back here. If we look at the test, because in this case, even though it's spinning a process, the exe for the process is the test project itself. Why is blank window in here? Let's just clean and rebuild real quick. Because in this case, this test project, the test control that it's using is inside of the project itself. I would expect to see test window. Oh, I wonder if it's getting confused because it's a linked component. I wonder. Oh. Oh, I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. It's not finding the XAML because the XAML is just not there. Sigh. So, okay. So, here's what I'm just now noticing. Is this is XAML.C#. Okay? Compare and contrast with the WPF side. That contained both. I think I'm just an idiot. This is two files, even though they show as nested. Okay, so this guy here was just share.wpf.xaml. Move. Okay, I thought we did this. WinUI. So this thing here didn't bring in anything. Didn't match any files. That doesn't seem right. Let's go to shared. Test controls. Test window dot WinUI3 dot XAML. WinUI3 dot XAML. Am I stupid? That would very strongly indicate that that was supposed to be brought in as a page. I mean, let's come up here and just double check to make sure the type is correct. So the type that it's being set here shows up if you right click on a file in your Solution Explorer and go to Properties. Your Properties window under Build Action, you'll note Page, Embedded Resource, Content, Resource, C# compiler, which maps to this compile one. Like if you ever want to know what things are, that's the way they show up. So it's showing as a page. Why? So the short version is it's not showing through here. Did I do a removal? I don't see where I would have removed it. Okay, let's just start with the obvious. If we change the filter to just be all XAML, let's see, that's WPF test. That doesn't pick up anything more. What? I mean, it found all of those. Let's just start eliminating stuff until we figure out. So that brought in too much, which is expected, but it's not bringing in any of the XAML ones. So what are the types referenced here? Okay, so let's go back to our MS build log. Okay, so what is the item sets? Where's my... I've lost my spot. Okay, so class items, add item. So is page correct? Actually, let's just search for blank window 1. Okay. So it's supposed to come in as both a page, apparently a custom additional compile inputs, and a resource. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay, so let's put this back. Rather than just this, I'll put this on the side. So we'll start with the bottom. We'll just do resource next. So if we do resource include, and it's going to be the same exact thingy-mabobber here. Boom. At some point, I expect this thing to light up with extra stuff. Okay, resource didn't do it. Come back over here. We're ignoring the compile one because that's the C# one. Custom additional compile inputs. Copy. Why are you not finding those XAML files? Okay, how about we just do a none include none doesn't bring them in. Oh, wait, what did that do? Ahaha. None found them. If I turn you off, is it this generator? Interesting. So why is that not being picked up? Is there something different about the way I've done this project versus this one? Is there a difference? What is the difference? Page update. So I mean, that's where we got this. Oh, is it supposed to be this? I wonder if... Doesn't make a lot of sense, but we're going to try it just the same. Interesting that that doesn't bring it in. But that does. Interesting. Properties. Interesting. So what happens if I change you to a page? You disappear. Something is actively removing it. Something is actively removing pages. Okay, so if we go back here, let's see. Enable default page items. What do you do? Copy name. I dropped it. No other reference to you, huh? Enable default page items. Let's try turning that on. That's not picking it up. Interesting. Okay. So you're not working. Okay, what happens if I hypothetically, let's go here, let's go test controls. Let's just copy you. Like actually put the files in here at the root, just for grins. Oh, interesting. This shows up as a none. Wait, is that because of what I did though? No. So let's get rid of this whole entire group. I should be left with just this guy. What are you? None. Really? That really surprises me. What happens if I paste you up here? If I go paste here, this one picks it up as a page. Okay, so I've done something wrong here. Not here. I've done something wrong here. It has nothing to do with my... It has nothing to do with my includes here. Let's see. None remove. Get rid of that. Let's see. So you are just straight up broken. What would be doing that? So something is different between these, and I don't know what yet. Okay, that's not the right project. So that's class lib there. UI test 3. So doc side by side. Okay, so target framework matches. Target min version matches. Root namespace is a little different. Doesn't matter. Runtime identifiers matches. Use WinUI true. We do have these two little guys here. I'm wondering if one of those two is messing with it. Oh, interesting. This has a none remove on blank window, then a page update. I think that would be needed to remove it. Yeah, the none remove must have just trickled in during a copy paste operation. Because this guy here is still showing up as a page, right? Yeah, so you show up as a page. But down here, you show up as a none page. Somebody is filtering you. Where did that put it? Probably somewhere at the bottom. Ooh, I feel like I'm about to sneeze again. Where is it? Okay, so that did a none remove. So it was in the none set, or at least it thought it was. Now it claims to be in the page set, but won't let me look at anything related to it. So if we do this, but change this to be the right XAML file, and then rebuild this. Maybe it's a downstream thing. That wouldn't do it. Okay, so we've got a bunch of usings. Maybe it's getting confused with this directory build props. And it's doing a removal of it. Oh, interesting. Oh, wait a minute. This is... Wait, how would the WPF one be working? Oh, so it adds... Okay. Okay, so this is fine. So this would add it back into the none set. And then remove it from the page and compile sets. This would remove the WPF ones. It's not something stupid like Kevin got his slashes backwards here and Emma still doesn't understand, is it? Oh, that's interesting. That is very interesting. Let's comment out this item group, our hacky one. Bring this one back. I wonder if it was those slashes. Oh, look at that. Look at that. And I don't think I need this anymore. This should be handled higher up. Oh, but apparently it's not. Why would this not be handled for me? Apparently I need this still. Not entirely sure why this isn't being picked up from kind of expected those other ones to do it, but I'm wondering if they are the culprits now. Okay, so this I think that does it now. Let's rebuild. We're going to see what comes in the output. So this may have been a big long bug chase for something that was me being an idiot, which is very, very possible. Duplicate, hold on. Duplicate page items were included. Enable default page item. Oh, look at that. So, well, at least the error message is useful. Enable default page items. Oh, I probably have to spell page correctly. I kind of imagine I'm going to run into a similar problem on the other ones too, but we'll see. See what happens. Something is weird to me that the directory build props isn't appropriately triggering. Something isn't quite right. And the thing is I know these global usings are working, so I'm a little curious as to how the other ones aren't. Okay. Test window already defines a member called test window. Yeah, see, this is where now we've got dupes added because of all the stuff I just did. So I'm kind of curious if I need any of this. Because I would have expected okay. We're gonna start small and add it back in. Okay, so I think we do this. That should get me the XAML files. Right? Okay. And then I want to, so let's see, it's including the C# ones. So I want this one here to drop that. Okay, so that is, I think, doing exactly what we want now. Let's try the build again. And I think the directory build props is triggering. This shared one would come in, bring in all of the C# ones. This then removes it. I suppose technically this should really end up more like over here. Okay, so this is now slightly interesting in that I don't care. So I'm now curious as to how this stopped compiling. So XAMLTest shared. Oh, that's not a good thing. So, right. Test shared. Test shared brings in a whole bunch of stuff. But it's also picking up the directory build props stuff as well that we just added. Got it. Okay. But the same change that we just made here probably needs to get made to the WPF side, which is likely why it's failing. Okay, so this is not necessary. All right, so let's adjust this one at a time. So we bring in the C# files, we exclude all of the ones that we don't want. And then we, I think, double enabled the page. That's probably okay. Let me look at the WPF app one here. Because what set are you supposed to be in? Page, MS build compile. Okay, so you are basically the same. And then you, if we rebuild you, because the props thing isn't adding anything to a, it's adding it to the none set, but it's not adding in, it's not adding in anything that would trigger a compile. Rebuild all successful. Okay. Okay, so now let's, so that other one was a bit of a red herring. That is one of the drawbacks. Because I have source generators in this solution that get built as part of the building, oftentimes this error list is highly misleading. So if you'll note, I jump over to the output window a lot to actually look at what is actually failing. WinUI3 tests. Test window already defines a member called test window with the same parameter types. Huh? You're getting another test window generated? So you're telling me I can do this. Seems very unusual, but for the sake of argument, let's assume you're right. Which version of VS are you using? Great question. So I am on latest preview, I believe. So 17.3.0 preview 4. At least this machine, I tend to run preview builds. I do have regular non-preview installed side by side, just because there are times where preview bits are, we'll say, less than functional. And so occasionally I leave it there kind of as a backup, and I update it when it whines about it. But for the most part, on this machine, I try to run the preview bits, because sometimes there's really cool stuff. Okay, so that compiled. Let's see, warning, the type test window conflicts with the imported type test window class library. Oh, so hang on, that's why it's saying there's a dupe. Hang on, do you have a reference to that other project? How? Oh, you reference test app. Test app is referencing. Oh. See, this is the problem when you copy files around. You end up with extras. So let's get rid of all of you now. Okay, so that should clean that up. Yeah, that should clean that up. That should now just work. Okay. We still technically have a bit of a problem. Or do we? Will this be a problem? I cannot dynamically load XML content from assemblies arbitrarily unless there's been a direct reference linked, in which case Visual Studio should copy the needed files. So it will work with project references. DLL references, it probably falls apart on. I think I'm okay with that. I think I am okay with that. Okay, so we are all built now. So let's... Okay, we're going to start with the obvious. Let's see. So, hang on. Come on. Test Explorer. Show me That's WPF test. Nope. Here, here, here. Okay. So start with the first test. Does the original test that we started with still work? Oh, debugger window pops. Passes. Okay. Run. Debugger window pops. Okay. So it failed, but it failed for something that is different. It expected custom test window and got WinUI desktop. Okay, so that sounds like so if I look at test window, oh, because I ended up commenting this out. We'll turn off the debugger launch here. Clean that up. So now, does that work? Come on, make me happy, make me happy, make me happy. Debugger window popped. Error creating. XAML parsing failed. So it failed to find it again, I assume. But let's check the output now. Bin. Debug. Okay, so we are looking for test window. And I assume it would be here, here, test window XBF. So that looks correct to me. I assume it's going to populate in there because it's launching an instance of the app, which is itself, and then is attempting to dynamically load something that is inside of itself, which should be possible. That looks right. The XBF is there. If we look at the initialized component, I assume it's loading from test controls, test windows, WinUI.XAML. So it's built out the XBF, it's there. It's interesting to me that I don't see the blank window from class library 1 here. Oh, it's probably here. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so it did pull. Man, what do they do if there's file conflicts? Huh. I have to think about that. Okay, so it's there. Why would it fail to map? Why would it fail to map? Because it should be test control. Oh, it's interesting that this is nested. So here's a theory. If I pull this up a level, does it magically start working? Completely irrelevant question. There are no such things on this stream. But would you mind sharing how you got involved with any of the open source projects you're on? I'd love to jump into one, but not sure where to start. Oh, that is a wonderful question. So let's see. So I love rabbit trails. So here we go. Okay, so I will call out some of them and I'll give kind of brief history lesson. So the material design project I found because I was through the course of my job, I was working on a WPF application At the time, we were building an industrial printer for creating printed circuit board PCBs, and I was tasked with building some of the operator control software, which was going to be a WPF app, and I wanted it to look pretty. So I started hunting for UI libraries and came up and found the Material Design and XAML toolkit. Absolutely loved it. Was a blast to work with. I ran into one or two issues. I don't remember what they were, but there were things that were logged. And so I jumped in and went, hey, these are issues. It's a WPF library. Let me start working on it. So I literally just started going through the issue backlog and clearing out issues. I think James Wilcox, the creator of the library, I think I probably spammed him to death over the course of a few months. And it just happened to be good timing because he was starting to feel a little burned out on the project because there was just so much coming in. And after reviewing a bunch of my pull requests, he asked me if I wanted contributor rights. And so one thing led to another. And basically just by doing pull requests on the library, I ended up just kind of by accident becoming the maintainer of it, which has been great. There's been a handful of people who have started helping out with it, and so I've been slowly, we'll say, trying to grow the team because this takes a lot of time to maintain a project of this size, and I need help. And oftentimes I like to play on some of my other projects, and so I bounce around a little bit. Don't take it as a lack of support for this. It's just sometimes I need a little variety. You can only eat broccoli so many days of the week. Another one was this AutoMocker library. And this one, a colleague of mine, Adam, we both were working on this. This one started as a kind of a weird thing. So AutoMocker is an extension to the mock or mock-Q mocking library. And at the time, it wasn't underneath the mock org. It was just being managed by one guy. And when .NET Core came out, we had opened up a pull request to update to the .NET Core stuff. And the pull request sat there, and it sat there, and it sat there, and it sat there. And finally, we got bored, and we were like, okay, enough of this. So we forked the library and kicked out from our fork, we merged our pull request and just kicked out a NuGet and started running rogue. We added a different NuGet ID because obviously we couldn't use the same NuGet ID that was out there. We're like, I think we appended like netcore or something to the end of it. And we threw it out there. And then a few months later, the original guy kind of came back to us. It's like, hey, sorry, would like to actually get your stuff merged. And then we kind of pinged him for a few other things that we wanted. And then once again, this may shock people, but open source maintainers, they don't have infinite time or resources and love help. They love it. Trust me. They love good help. And so we got put on as maintainers of this project too. It got pulled inside the mock org just so that there was, rather than it being a single point of failure, there could be a little more administration of it. So once again, kind of a story of started working on it and then got stuff picked up. Let's see, I will pick on this one here. So this is the system command line library that I've done other streams on. This one I got involved with only because of my employer. So my boss, Mark Michaelis, is a Microsoft regional director. And even before I became a Microsoft MVP, we got involved in this project. And it started because my boss, he likes to network with people and loves talking to people. Hi, Mark. And so oftentimes, and people know that he is not a yes man. He will not, if he gives you high praise, it's because he thinks it, not because he's saying something that you want to hear. And shockingly, people actually really enjoy having people around that are willing to tell them, no, that's dumb, or that's wrong, or ask questions about, hey, why are you doing it this way? And so we got pulled in of, hey, you've said that you were a little frustrated with the command line experience in C#. We've got this kind of idea of taking the command line parser that was in the .NET CLI. We're going to break it into its own thing. You interested in helping? And so this project started as a fork off of the parser that was built in the .NET CLI, and then it kind of came full circle, and now it is, the .NET CLI is now referencing this project, so it's kind of fun. So yeah, and if you are running the .NET CLI on any of the preview builds, you have system command line embedded inside of it. So this one was more about networking and once again just contributing. So this is one that anyone is welcome to contribute to. People, because it has a .NET prefix on it, people get scared of it. What I would say is John, the principal lead on this, his policy is if you didn't break any of the unit tests, your code can't be that bad. As long as you've written tests for any new code and you didn't break any of the old tests, you're golden, because this project has a lot of tests. It is very high test coverage, so it's pretty hard to break something without breaking a test. I'd also like to participate in the open event, but don't think that I'm competent enough. So I think, Justin Bieber, the one that you're talking about is Hacktoberfest, that you've seen me talk up a bunch. And I fully expect that this site will update sometime in the next several months for 2022. And I will once again be participating. A lot of my open source libraries will be in it as well. What I would say is, if you are watching my videos, you're probably competent enough. Typically, in October, I will do at least one video, maybe more, all around just trying to do like getting started type videos of, hey, let's make sure that we understand Git and source control. Typically, the Hacktoberfest tends to center around trying to get new people into open source. So on a lot of repositories, you will see the label like good first issue that gets thrown around a lot. And what is often meant by those is good first issue is intended to be, hey, this is for somebody who may not feel competent enough, who's looking for something to try and tackle. Oftentimes it's things that are either pretty well spelled out of what needs to be changed, or it's a fairly small change where it's probably not very big. And oftentimes as maintainers, we will actively try to discourage our regular contributors from taking those issues, because usually they're not usually the high priority bugs of, oh, we got to get this fixed before release. Hey, Black Shinobi, thanks. Oh, I appreciate the party. Welcome. We are discussing open source projects and getting involved with them, at least at the moment, before I get distracted again. But again, for Hacktoberfest, the idea is to try to get a lot of newer people involved in open source. So if you are able to at least operate a GitHub account, you've got some sort of ability to like push, pull, and open pull requests, you're probably competent enough. Some of the issues are going to just be simple documentation updates. And welcome, Black Shinobi up. Great to have everybody here. I'm hoping you had a good stream. I'll have to go back and take a peek. So yeah, again, what I would say, Justin, is if you're watching the stream, and especially if you're interested, let me go back. Boom. So there is, let's see. So something like, actually, I'm just going to link the whole search. A lot of these ones in here, you'll note, tend to land right around Hacktoberfest or similar and related stuff. So a lot of these are set up for teaching people just the basics of getting started. And again, programming skill is kind of optional. And even on like the material design project or any of the ones that I work on, I would say there's not a lot of, if somebody is interested in getting involved, there is always low-hanging fruit that may not require a lot of technical expertise to do right. Is there an open source projects you may be interested in? There is, shoot, what is it called? See, they always crop up on my feeds around, I think it's this one. Yeah, this is it. There's several sites kind of like this that are basically aggregate sites, where if you want to come in and say, okay, you know, I've got a little bit of knowledge in C#, I want to find maybe help wanted is another common label for things. This can kind of get you into the kind of help you get your feet wet a little bit, depending on what you are looking for. Is so good for beginner. Why do I not see good first issue? Wow, why is good first issue so limited? I don't know what this thing's aggregating from. Am I on the wrong site, perhaps? Yeah, maybe Dev.io has a link to other ones. Yeah, this is usually the idea. And a lot of times with Hacktoberfest, it is about kind of getting people to that next step of, hey, I've heard of open source. I don't know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing, but I need a little help to complete the issues. And then you're off. At that point, sky's the limit. Have fun. Something in the back of my mind, Jared, is telling me that there's another site that I found in the past that is an aggregator of a lot of GitHub projects that have good first issue on there. Some projects, the aggregators used to be a lot better, and then things like Hacktoberfest kind of, I think, burned some maintainers out, because there was a lot of people that jumped on board and submitted a lot of low quality pull requests. And so low quality pull requests are oftentimes where people go through and submit unrequested changes, especially with Hacktoberfest, where there's a free t-shirt for like the first, I don't remember how many, 100,000 or something people that get 5 pull requests in. Some maintainers get spammed and get people that go through and do like a rename of one word in a README and submit that as a pull request. Now, if you find a legitimate typo in somebody's README, yes, submit the pull request. That is absolutely recommended. But people who are making changes that aren't really needed. Oh, thank you, Black Shinobi. Those are the ones that burn the maintainers out the most. Like, there is not, that ends up leaving you with a lot of cruft to sift through, because as the maintainer, like for people who watched my stream a couple weeks ago, I spent two and a half hours just reviewing pull requests, and that can take a bit of time to review pull requests. And so if you get spammed with a bunch of pull requests that are low quality, you have to sift through all of that cruft to find the good ones, and that just gets annoying. So don't submit crap pull requests. If it's a, like I said, a legitimate typo, like the material design project, there was an unsolicited pull request not that long ago. Let me go find it, because it was good. Where is it? Fix typos. Right? So I didn't ask for anyone to go through and spell check the repo, but I'm a horrible speller, as are many programmers. But there was legitimate, like, toolkit, right? Missing an L. That's a legitimate typo. And I'm not sure what tool he used, because it was very disparate stuff all over the place. It could have been ReSharper or similar, but he also found things outside of code, I thought. Maybe it was all just code-related stuff. I thought I saw README changes too. But there was a bunch of typos and unrelated stuff. And it was a great pull request. Like, this is this is like this type of thing is a very good one. It was very easy to review. Admittedly, there's 45 files in this pull request, but all of the changes are things like this, where it's like, yeah, Kevin can't spell. Okay, I get it. I suck at spelling. Thank you. Sometimes it's just straight up, I suck at typing. That's a thing too. Especially if I'm typing on stream. The more eyes watching you, the worse it gets. So, the one thing I usually tell people about Hacktoberfest is find some project that interests you. And if you aren't sure which ones interest you, look at the ones that you use on a daily basis. Because oftentimes there will be, most of the big ones do participate in Hacktoberfest. I shouldn't say most. A large number of projects do participate in Hacktoberfest. Like I said, a few years ago, a lot of maintainers pulled out because they got burned. But DigitalOcean, the people who sponsor it, they put some guardrails in place to try to cut down on the spam and the cruft. And last year, I don't think I had a single pull request on any repository that I flagged as spam. I don't think I had one, which is pretty good. Like I kept seeing horror stories on Twitter of people going, my repo is getting spammed with all of this stuff. And it's like, every single pull request I got was reasonable, right? Some of them, they needed to be a little back and forth. And during, well, I should say, especially during October, but even throughout the year, if I see somebody come in and it marks them as like the first time contributor thing in GitHub, that's an immediate trigger in my mind to go, okay, this person may not be familiar with the code base. They may not be familiar with coding in general. I don't know how much experience they have. And so oftentimes that's an opportunity to try to get somebody to take that next step of, okay, let's move beyond, I've got no clue what's going on, to here's what would be helpful to change. Like sometimes I do go through and I'll just push changes into somebody's branch to help the pull request along. But if it's somebody who legitimately looks like they're trying to learn, I'd rather teach rather than do, because what is the old saying? You teach a man, or you give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. You teach a man to fish and he will eat for the rest of his life, or something to that effect. It does not apply to fire. Do you use XAML material design in your work projects? Currently, no, which is disappointing. I currently have no projects through my work that is teach a horse to fish and you've got something special. No projects through my work that is using the material design library currently, or at least not directly. So there is one project that I help out with every so often that is leveraging MA apps. And for people who aren't familiar, just show this off because Juan is awesome. This guy here, for anybody interested. This is our, like, there's a handful of really good WPF libraries out there. This is one of the good ones. So of the free good ones, MA apps, a library called Control-ZX is another one. All GitHub, please. This one. Yeah, this guy. This one is by Bastian Schmidt, the same guy who actually makes Snoop. And you'll note Juan is also one of the sponsors of this. All of these projects, the Control-ZX, MA apps, and material design, a lot of the developers, we kind of help each other out. And so these ones kind of run in a pack a little bit. So we occasionally poach from each other the good stuff, share the good stuff, go back and forth. Like, you'll even note that in the material design library, there is a MA apps integration package as well. So if you want to use MA apps with the material design stuff, there is an integration NuGet package you can bring in. And Juan comes in, and anytime there's an update, he will help me get this integration package updated appropriately, which is great. Like sometimes it's hard for me to keep up on, oh, this change happened over here and this change happened over here and back and forth. But it's really nice being able to ask and say, hey, you mind helping me? Or, what changed here? I'm clearly not seeing something, and it just goes great. So, yeah, I would love to get more WPF projects to work on through work. Unfortunately, it is not. WPF is one of those things that when there's a client that needs it, they really need it because it's a hard skill set to find. But there's not a ton of people looking for it. So it's one of those, if you're good at it, you can usually find work, but there's not a big pool of work of it. I'll say that. But it is difficult to find people that are skilled in WPF. That is not a common one. I rabbit trailed there a long ways. Very long ways. Okay, circling back off the rabbit. Okay. For all of the people who came in on the raid, the thing that this whole stream started with was the XAML Test library, which is a way of testing desktop apps by submitting a small chunk of XAML, something like this, and then being able to write standardized unit testy like stuff over it. The key difference between this library and a lot of UI testing library is this one spins up a full version of the app, so that rather than trying to simulate like the rendering pipeline, you're just inside of a kind of a blank template app, and sky's the limit. You have a blank canvas, paint away. Let's see, let's switch back here. And at present was looking to try to see and get a WinUI port to it. I think that's where I so quickly got distracted. Let's see, stack pop, stack pop, stack pop. Okay, test window wasn't compiling appropriately, and when it did compile, the initialized component was failing to find it, and we were going to test pulling up the. That's right. We were going to pull up the file one level and see, because we know that if the XBF file is found, it will be parsed. And we know when there was no initialized component, it also succeeded. Okay. See, I know I'd get myself back eventually. I eventually got there. It was a little rabbit trail, but I love rabbit trails. What do you think about Maui coming soon? Can kill WPF. Ooh, so good question. So Maui is GA now. This is weird. So Maui is GA, but to get the Maui toolchain, you have to install the preview Visual Studio. Like, it doesn't show up in the Visual Studio installer until you're under the preview, which is weird. I don't think Maui will kill off desktop apps. I have a hard time believing it will. So Maui is awesome. For anybody with XAML knowledge, it is my go-to platform for building mobile-based applications. So if I want to target Android, iOS, I'm going to Maui, because I do XAML. That makes that platform really easy for me to jump into. Just great. The thing is, Xamarin Forms technically had WPF support too, and very few people ported to it. And I think the big thing for me is you give up with Maui and XAML. It means that I now have a way to write Android and iOS apps using a framework that I'm familiar with. With using Maui to write desktop apps, it's no longer giving me something that didn't exist there. It's trying to compete with the WPF or WinUI XAML. So it's now kind of competing on a level playing field rather than competing on where there was no XAML framework for it natively. So on one hand, which then means that I give up some of my native platform features to play in the Maui land. And with Maui, you don't have to. Like, they've done a great job of giving you nice integration points where if you want to write platform-specific stuff, yeah, you just put your platform code over in this one spot, and then the rest of it just works. And you can go native platform as much as you want and shared code as much as you want. Their method for doing the code sharing is amazing. Love it. But the problem is if I'm going to write my UI and I want to use native XAML, I'm giving up most of the benefits that MAUI gives me. And it's adding a lot of complexity without a lot of gain. And so I don't think MAUI will kill off desktop apps. I think it's going to be a great platform for building cross-platform mobile. Because the other thing is, once you go to a desktop app versus a mobile, you already now have to start think about what are they called? Snap points? Might be snap points. The point in your UI when you're like resizing your window, where it changes from mobile size to like tablet size to like full desktop size, and like kind of where those breakpoints are where you're going to rearrange your elements. And so if you're using MAUI to build a desktop app, you now immediately have to start thinking about that. Versus if you're just targeting phones, you can kind of get away with just thinking about like portrait and landscape. And then if you add in tablets, like, okay, now I got to add a little bit more and start thinking about it a little more, and it starts to get bigger fast. And I don't know, like I can see people using MAUI to write desktop apps. I don't know if I struggle to picture the use case where that would be my go-to choice, where I want a desktop app and a bunch of mobile apps, and I have a bunch of code to share. I'm sure people have some use cases. I don't think it's going to be that common. So, and I also don't think WinUI3, I think it has the potential to try to kill off WPF, but if working on the XAML test WinUI3 port has taught me anything, it's that WinUI3 feels like it has a lot of rough edges, and WPF has years and years of tooling and libraries and a very stable ecosystem. That's a hard thing to usurp. Like Windows Forms, WinForms is still alive and kicking and doing great. Like I believe it is the largest Windows desktop platform out there. And it's also one of the oldest. So it's amazing when you are first to market and have a reasonable framework. Because there's such a rich ecosystem, it is really hard to unseat an ecosystem that is big. Okay, so that guy went there. By the way, love questions and do not mind rabbit trailing in the least. Okay, so I do want to try pulling this test controls folder up a level, because I have a sinking suspicion if I pull this up a level, this might... Oh, no, that was already there. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so we're going to go here, and we're going to do this. Debugger launch. So we're going to catch it right here. So for anybody just coming to the stream, WinUI, when you are running it inside of a unit test, doesn't automatically attach the debugger. Again, we're going to chalk that up to one more point on the has rough edges part. Okay, so run. No problem. Like I said, I love questions, even if they are only loosely related. I have no problem rabbit trailing on questions, because oftentimes those invoke some of the most interesting discussion. Okay, so debugger window pops. You'll note I hit run on the test, not debug the test. Okay, so this isn't the one, this isn't the debugger launch that I wanted to catch. So we're gonna run it. I should catch it again. What? Now that is interesting to me. That is very, very interesting to me. The test now passes. What? Attaching the debugger caused the test to pass? No. No, just no. Okay. Oh, I don't think I got rid of my other debugger launch. We'll see if we hit it. That's the other thing, is I didn't hit my other debugger launch. Oh, but I was already attached. Debugger launch won't do anything if you're attached already. So this one should pop that window again. And I apologize, it's popping it off screen. Okay, so we'll reattach. Here. Here. And it succeeds. Ah. The plot thickens. Okay. Okay. Okay, so theory. Okay, so that passed with the debugger attached again. We're going to take the debugger off and try it one more time, because I'm really hoping that it's not like resolving a path based upon working directory and having the debugger attached changes the executable's working directory or something stupid like that. That would really annoy me. Okay, so still passes. Okay, still passes. So what I want to try now is I want to try deleting this test controls, because my theory is this now fails. That's my working theory. Ha 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 ha. Okay, let's one more test. One more test. We don't want to say for certain. If I pull this thing back up again to the root alongside of where this is running, and then I run this again, hate you so much. Okay, so we know what's happening, but not why. So just to clarify. So what is happening is when we are compiling, the XBF file for the XAML is being nested inside of XAMLTest WinUI3 test controls. However, if we look at the initialized component that exists here, it is expecting it to exist inside of test controls, which is why pulling that folder up a level works. I love it, Justin. So okay. So now the question is, why is there a disjoint between this resource locator URI and what the heck is being built? So I'm inclined, because of seeing how this class library and this one were built, right? So if we look at the class library here and we go into his debug directory, you'll note his are just project name / and it found it. Oh, that's interesting. It's going so this is project name, and then the thing is directly under it. So I'm almost inclined to think that the build is correct and this initialized component is wrong. That this should actually include the project name. That you should actually include the project name. And I'm wondering if this is breaking because of the file linking bits. So here's how we're going to test this. Add. What? Okay, add new item. We're going to test it this way. I just want to add a window. It's my window. Whoa. Blank page. Sure. Link page. Would you say that speaking out loud helps you critically think and solve problems? As I listen to your thought process, it's making me reflect on my own and how I can improve. I am glad it is helping you. A little bit. So there is a popular. Okay, so again, small rabbit trail, but this is worth it because it has a rubber duck in it. Rubber duck debugging. As you can tell, it was already in my history. So anyone unfamiliar with this site should go and read. This is a very important lesson. When I taught at the university before, there was one day where I literally took rubber ducks into the classroom. I'm pretty sure my students thought I was crazy, and I explained the concept of talking to a duck. And thank you all. You are all effectively my ducks tonight. But there is something to be said for explaining your problem out loud. When I first started out, I didn't like, it feels really weird. And I don't like, even if you're in a room by yourself, no one can see you, you are isolated, it feels weird to talk to a duck. And even some of my colleagues, we will occasionally just use the phrase of, hey, come here, I need a duck, which basically says, I want to talk to you. You can provide feedback if you want, but really, I just need to, aren't you crazy? But I really just want to explain to you what's going on. And usually by the time you're done explaining the process to somebody, you come to the conclusion of what the solution is, which happens more often than I will admit. I've never actually realized that speaking out loud helps me think, because sometimes I will go through the process of explaining in my head, because otherwise I would ignore all my colleagues if I just started rambling off everything in my head all the time. But sometimes there is something to be said about backing up and trying to think through and explain what is the problem. And worst case scenario, if you want to, they do have an even type to the duck. I need help. And the duck will gently prod you along with a set of basically probing questions that all equate to keep talking. Because that's effectively what it is keep explaining the problem until you either understand it or identify the appropriate question to ask. Because sometimes that's what it really comes down to, is trying to identify what is the appropriate question to ask. And oftentimes in debugging, that's really all it is trying to figure out what is the right question to ask. Okay, so first thing, I added a new page. And I'm curious what this thing did. So this thing added a none. No problem, Jared. Added a none and added a page here. So I'm curious, when I build this, see, I want to look at his initialized component. So he is not nested at all. This duck is so understanding, there's a good chance it will become my best friend. Telling you. And when in doubt, you can, it is usually fairly easy to acquire rubber ducks. They are somewhat cheap. In fact, at one point in time, I looked at buying rubber ducks in bulk off Amazon. You can get hundreds of rubber ducks. There was a comedian at one point, James Veach, that had a great skit about rubber ducks. Should see if I can find that at some point. Okay, so this guy went there, right? And that, let's see, I'm in WinUI3. Okay, so as expected, I added in the blank page, and the blank page shows up here. I am wondering if my working directory is off. Because I am noticing there is a test host exe and a test host. Why is there a separate one in here? Like, this is one of those use cases where I can guarantee I am so far out in the weeds that nobody else is dumb enough to be trying this stuff of, okay, I'm going to have a project that's both an executable and a library, and I'm going to make it a unit test project. And when I start my unit test, I'm going to spin a separate process pointed to the same DLL. And then inside of that, I'm going to try to use reflection to create an instance of a class. Like, okay, I get it. No sane person does that, except for me. I'm wondering, though. This guy's still in the working state. Yeah. Okay, so let's go here. I'm wondering what my working directory is. So we're going to run this again. And when that debugger pops, we're going to check our working directory. Because I have a... Huh? Did I take out my debugger launch? I did take out my debugger launch. Debugger launch. Okay. Let's try this one more time. Because I have a sinking suspicion this is going to be working directory related. I have a suspicion. Okay. So I guess the question really comes down to how that resource locator works. Okay, so getting your working directory, immediate window here. So we can do something like path, get full path, period, right? Because the immediate window, you can just execute stuff arbitrarily. Oh. That's the root of my repository. I did not expect that. Really? Not evaluate expression because native frame is on top of the call stack. Well, okay, step. Now evaluate it. Okay, so directory, get current directory. This is more like what I expected. So the working directory has the items. Oh, interesting. Wait a minute. This guy, source location here. Didn't we change this at one point? Yeah, we changed this at one point, setting a property that made it go to the root. Because right now, class library is nesting it down one. Right? And if we go back and look at the app, is it nesting or is it at the root? Yeah, so this is where I think that, I think this is the subtle difference. Okay, so note this the WinUI3 project has a XAML file at the root. Class library 1 has a XAML file at the root. Both of these are set to page. Right? So we'll pin that there for a minute. Page, right? But there's a subtle difference in where the XBF file lands. Inside of the WinUI3 project, the XBF is at the root. It's sitting right alongside the executable. Whereas inside of the library, it's nested down a level based on the project. So when it's a library, it goes down a level. What does this show? Yeah, and even the generator does it. So the generator in the class library pushes it down, project name / and then relative path. Whereas this one puts it right at the root. Okay. This is going to always be a problem for me. Because that means there is different behavior depending on whether you're being used as a exe. Let me rephrase. Different behavior depending on whether you compile as an exe or a library. And if you compile as one, you can't be used as the other. And I am attempting to use them both together. Suck. Oh. That is really interesting. It is really interesting that it makes that assumption. How do you solve that? Because if I compile it as an exe, yawning. Need do. If I compile as an exe, I'm going to come up a level. What's the best way to solve this? This is very, very interesting. I do not know the cleanest solution here. Because that would mean I could run this test using the window from class library, but not the window from here. Let's confirm that. I think I can use blank window 1 from class library 1, and I think main window from the WinUI3 app will fail. That is what I am proposing. I think. Let's test it. Proof is in the pudding. Okay, so can you somehow use the actions after the assembly? The problem is it appears to be compile based, and I'm doing something at runtime. Maybe. We're gonna try this. So this we want to change to blank window 1, right? So and we don't even care about this, right? If we can instantiate and run, like we don't even care about the assertion. If we can create the window and get something back, we're good. And then this one here is going to be main window. Probably going to have to qualify it. Oh, we'll get away with it. Okay. I may end up having to add in we will see. I don't think I have to initialize with any other assemblies because my assembly references them. But let's run those and see what happens. Again, the theory is that I will work with the blank window and fail with main window. Blank works, main fails. They both succeeded. Huh? See, this is the part where you realize that you don't actually understand what's going on. Bin debug. What is... Oh, this is shared. See, this is the problem, is I've done so much hacktastic stuff with MS Build, the tooling has lost its mind. Okay, so class library 1 is nested, and it's able to find it, which makes sense because the initialized component here is going to look for it nested under there. Okay, main window is not nested. So where is main window? Did it get copied in? Look at that. It exists right there. Interesting. So, I guess what that means, though, I've lived in that part for years. I clearly don't understand how any of this works. Well, so the important thing, though, in programming is to not fall into faith-based coding. Like, I always hate when people are like, oh, we can't touch that portion of code. Why? Well, because every time we touch it, something weird breaks, and therefore we never want to touch it. It's like, well, don't you want to know why it's breaking? Like I get the, like, sometimes it's legitimate, like, hey, we don't have time, we know there's something wrong there, but we're you know, we've got this deadline or whatever, right? I get it. As long as there's an acknowledgement of, yes, we understand there's something we need to spend time investing in, we just don't have the time right now. I can understand that argument. Like, that makes sense. What I don't understand is people who have the time and choose not to and say, well, we just don't ever touch that. It's like, but that's bad. Okay, so I think what that means, though, is I can theoretically change So I can theoretically change that packing level. Because if you recall, where'd it go? This one. One of these, disable XBF generation, I believe it was markup pass 2 leveraged this, and there was the condition over here that was something blah blah blah. Where was that condition? I remember seeing you in here, and I don't remember where you were, but there was the one with the, like, the PRI stuff that did the thingy that made it not generate nested. As you can tell, that was a well thought out PRI index name. Fingerprint. That isn't it. I could just go look at the failing one. Oh, that's right. It wasn't here. It was actually in the repo. When we search load, this is where we saw it, right here. Because in our case, we're going to be output type WinExe, and so we are, for the test project, we are probably falling here. Prepend PRI initial path. And I think what we want is we want to explicitly set that to false for this. And then I think we want to clean and rebuild and look at the output directory, because I think this will fix it. The question will then be, what is the appropriate way to communicate this to downstream? Oh, see? The moment I did that, though, it turned... See, as soon as I did that, it dropped my XAML files. That is very, very interesting that it does that. Okay, show me where that's used. So the tests are going to true. Library is true. Interesting. Oh, actually, it's not being set. This is a different property. This is Apex. Oh, so maybe it actually needs to be set to true. Ahaha. Okay, rebuild. Show me your output settings. I'm curious. One of these things is going to toggle this. Oh shoot, it's midnight. Why am I still awake? I'm out of Mountain Dew and it's midnight. Why would this... The plot is thickening. Plot is thickening. Okay. Rebuild all successful. Where are my files? There they are. So it nested them. But the question is when it nested them, what did the generator do inside of initialized component for the URI? Interesting. So something is confused when doing this as a unit test project. This almost feels like something I want to spin a smaller example of and submit a bug report on, because I realize it's not normal. I'm not normal. I get that. However, this is kind of a pain in the butt. So let's see. Alternate workaround is rather than having the library also be the executable, those two things could be flopped. Ugh. I mean that would work, but that feels so yucky. Basically spin two projects, one as an XC and one as a library, and they just happen to contain the same code. Ugh. That leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It's this close. It's this close. I mean, the other option. Okay, hear me out. Hear me out on this one. Okay, we're going to get rid of the debugger launch, because this should be in a broken state. We already have a source generator that's running. Right, so this should fail. Just going to confirm what I think I know. This fails. And I think if I pass a different URI, I can make it pass. Okay, this fails. Perfect. Okay, so then what we do is we go into initialize component. We copy this content. Come out here. We paste it. We call this initialize component 2. We invoke 2 instead of the normal one. We use the content loaded. We change this guy to be prefixed with XAML Test WinUI3.test/. And I think this now works. That's my theory. Because of this nesting here. So rather than moving the files up, we'll change the URI that's passed. Okay. So I need to find the tool that is doing that generation and give it a swift kick and try to convince it to treat me like this library. I need to convince it because I've either set something additional or not set something, and that's changing the behavior. Okay. What I heard was commit and go to bed. I think that's what it is. We're still very confused on XFB files. It was XFB, right? Pretty sure it is. Yeah. XBF. So commit, push, and I will have to continue poking at it more on a different day. It's really frustrating not having a solution, but on one hand, I feel like I have learned yet more about WinUI, so it has not been a waste. That is part of why I've been building this, is because it does force me to learn way more about this stuff than I probably have business knowing. Like, most people probably don't fire open the build logger and step through the targets files to figure out what's going on. That's not normal. I hope that's not normal. If that's you, I applaud you. So, yeah, I'm going to keep poking at it. If other people are interested in it and want to poke too, I always appreciate the feedback. If you are doing WPF app stuff and want to play with XAML Test, give it a test drive. I will warn you, I still have it as preview NuGet packages because I want to review the public API before I call it done, because there's a few APIs I might want to rename. So just be aware. I don't plan on making major breaking changes, but I do plan on cleaning it up. I also contemplated the idea of making an XUnit shim so that rather than doing fact, you could do like XAMLTest fact, have that just work out of the box, which sounded like a fun thing to do. So if you're interested in building XUnit extensions, let me know. I might throw that on a stream as well. Thank you all for coming and hanging out. It's always great. For everybody still hanging out from the raid earlier, hopefully you found it interesting. I tend to do a lot of C# WPFE related content and open source and Git related stuff too. So if any of that is interesting, feel free to hang out more. You can also find links. All of my recordings end up going out to YouTube. You'll probably notice a pattern in the URLs. So you can find me at insertsocialthing.kebu.dev or just kebu.dev to get all the links. So with that, I will say happy coding. Have a good night. See everyone next time.